Why is it crack, everyone? It's Nathan here, aka the Rambling Kern, and head instructor of Current Skill Combat. So, a viewer messaged me with a brilliant little follow up and a request from one of my previous videos, and I encourage anyone to do that because that's kind of what my channel is all about. It's kind of answering and helping you guys with the bits of Irish history that you're curious about. And he had a fantastic little point that he saw, and kind of one of my videos kind of made him think on, and he went and researched and came back to me with some really great bits of information. So in my video on Irish darts, I kind of discussed as to why we don't really find as many that we do. And one of the main reasons why I think we don't get as many attributed as darts as we do is because often they're either categorized as large arrowheads or very small spearheads. However, there is kind of this range in between where they kind of sit, and it's where the identification of them becomes quite difficult because it could potentially be one or the other or both. And there's a very, very interesting subset and style of arrow and spearhead, and most likely javelin or dart head, that we find in Ireland during the Viking and early medieval period. When that seems to stop, I genuinely don't know, and I'm really struggling to find information on. So that's where kind of my call goes out to you guys, if you can help me find information if there's any later examples of these arrowheads. So you've probably seen it in the thumbnail, but I'm going to bring up some screenshots so you know what I'm talking about. And that is these double and sometimes triple bladed arrowheads. Now I can't even find a classification or a name for these. The best I've seen is an offset arrowhead or offset bladed arrowhead. But I genuinely can't find any particular typography or clarification or classification for these. But as you can see, they're basically the kind of traditional leaf style arrowhead, but with the variation that is basically one going one way and one going the other way, and sometimes even a third one going the original way. But interestingly, these seem to be made in two very distinctive ways. One seems to be where it's obviously a bar of steel or iron flattened in one direction and then turned 90 degrees and flattened in the other direction. However, you can see on this example that I'm about to bring up where the head seems to have been made in one flat piece. The top piece was kind of pinched down, and then the whole thing was twisted to make this kind of the very, very distinctive shape. So the one really interesting thing you'll see with these is, obviously, if you were to be stabbed or punctured with one of these, you're going to end up with a horrible kind of X-shape wound. And that's obviously why these heads were used in the way that they were. And it would make sense why we'd see so many in and around the likes of Dublin, where you would expect ranged weapons to be used, and especially things like javelins and darts to be used quite often, because you don't necessarily need to throw something especially far if someone's trying to attack a city wall. And that's where we do tend to find a lot of arrowheads and spearheads for that exact reason. Because people are just throwing them off the wall at attackers. So these are very fascinating heads. You don't really seem to see these in many other parts of Europe. I'm not really aware of that many other ones. They are a very unique and distinct type of head. I know of a spearhead of this type that was found in County Offaly. And I'm going to show you on the screen here an example of one that's in the Irish National Museum. Like I said, these are a really fascinating type of head, and the viewer who brought this to my attention, he made the point that on one of the socketed examples, so basically you have socketed and tanged versions of these, and on one of these examples, I'm forgetting whether it's tanged or socketed, but either way, I believe it was the tanged, actually, beg your pardon. So on the tanged versions, some of the earlier Viking versions of these, basically you have a tang that sits down into a socket like that, and he was able to very astutely pick up that due to the tang diameter, you can actually very clearly and distinctly pick out the width of whatever the shaft would be that's on it. It comes out to roughly around 13 millimeters, which you can see is a very, very big size for an arrowhead, but not nearly stout enough for a spearhead. So it really sits in that kind of ideal javelin / dart range. Now, obviously a lot of these are much earlier. These are kind of Viking and early medieval period. They aren't really getting into the realms of the kind of fletched kern darts that we associate with kind of late medieval or early Renaissance period Ireland. Now, were these being fletched? Were these being used in this way? Perhaps. It's kind of impossible to say. I'm not going to say one way or the other. But we do know throughout Europe that, especially for city defence, that fletched javelin heads were extremely popular. And I'll bring up a few examples on screen of artwork that shows this. These were an extremely popular weapon used in and around all sorts of fortifications. And it makes sense because you'd simply throw one of these up in the air. They have enough weight and mass that when they're coming down, they're going to come down with quite a bit of force and speed, but also the fletching is going to right them the way that you want and cause all sorts of havoc. So, really, really fascinating find, really, really interesting find, and a really common thing that I said does tend to pop up. You have often these things being classified. It's easier to classify them into one or the other, and often there's, especially with the likes of these sort of heads, there's kind of this space in between where they're not quite a spear, they're not quite an arrowhead, they're most likely a javelin or a dart or something along that line. So kind of this is my call out to all of you people. If any of you know of any later examples of these styles of arrowheads or spearheads in Ireland, please do let me know. I would love to find out. I do plan on trying to get my hands on some of these heads in the future and do some testing with them. It'd be really fascinating to try on some gelatin and actually see do these wounds kind of leave that sort of X shape, or are they kind of hampered by the shape that they are? There's some really, really interesting arrowheads and spearheads found in and around Dublin. I mean, you have this example where it's almost like a leaf shape after a bodkin, which is a very unusual and quite fascinating design in my opinion. So there is a lot of really unique arrowheads and spearheads at the time, and I'd really like to kind of dive deeper into these. Did these just disappear? Were these just a kind of flash in the pan of a design, or were they just popular in Ireland for this very brief period and never really took off because they weren't that effective, or they just weren't popular? I don't know. So that's where, if you guys can dig up any more information or even find some kind of classification for these, it'd be a huge help. Either way, I hope for those who aren't familiar with these, you've kind of now been exposed to what is, in my opinion, a very fascinating style of weapon, and one that we don't really see much of. And we're going to see something very similar in next week's video, which I'm still doing research on, but it's quite a fascinating one, so do stay tuned. If you like my work and want to sponsor me, I do have a Patreon, and you'll find that down below in the description. If you can't afford that, or you're not interested, like, comment, subscribe, all that sort of stuff does massively help, and I would really appreciate it. Like I said, if you have any further information, or even if you have videos that you would like me to do for you, or any topics you'd like to discuss, please let me know. I'm more than happy to do it. It's really great when my viewers kind of give back like this. It helps me do my kind of further my research, and obviously kind of gives me real fuel for the fire of things that I can do in the future. So I really do appreciate all the effort that everyone puts in. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and slán.